Our program, and as promised, we do have Congressman Jim Renacci in our studio. Good morning, Congressman.
Morning, Ron. How are you?
Good. And you said you didn't get a facelift. You said you've been running. You look a lot better than. Not that you looked bad the last time I saw you. You look younger.
Well, you know, I've been, as I said, in Washington. It wears you down. You spend a lot of time, but I have been running in the morning and I run in the evening in Washington. I'm trying to make sure that I keep my body healthy because that's important.
Well, speaking of running, you're in the middle of a campaign. And I want to give you an opportunity, first of all, before we do anything, to tell me about your first term in Congress. What are some of the things you're most proud of?
Well, it's interesting, and I tell people this on the campaign trail all the time, that my first term in Congress, there's been some disappointments and there's been some things I'm very proud of. The disappointments are really how Washington works. I've said all along, things don't start on time, they don't finish on time. There's that attitude where in the business world you would never allow that to happen. But the things I'm proud of, I have this bipartisan breakfast group that meets about every 3 weeks. We have 5 or 6 pieces of legislation out there. I just actually have 2 bills that were presented in the House, a couple weeks back. One with Democrat and I that actually helps with credit ratings. So I've had some bipartisan bills. I've had some friends over on the other side. I'm very proud of that I can walk over on the other side, shake hands, and talk to people. We may disagree on how to get to a certain place, but I can tell you one thing, we're agreeing that we got to make some changes.
Well, I agree with that as well, and I like the civil part of debate and discussion. I'm just so disappointed in a lot of the campaigns that I hear, and a lot of things that's going on in the campaigns. What are you most disappointed in your first 2 years?
Well, what I'm most disappointed in really is that when you get down there and you know the system, you realize that the system takes time and you got to get involved. But I think I've gotten a jump on things. I mean, I'm vice chair of a committee as a freshman, that subcommittee. That doesn't happen.
What committee is that? Subcommittee? That's
the Banking and Financial Institutions Subcommittee. I'm a member of the Financial Services Committee, which is one of the 4 A committees in Congress. I'm very proud of that. We're working through a lot of the Dodd-Frank issues. But one thing that disappoints me is that, in the business world, when you make decisions, and none of your decisions are going to be 100% right, and you're going to have issues with some of the decisions you make, whether it's the family or whether it's the business or whether it's back home, all decisions can't be 100% right. So you change or you shift or you make changes to some of those things. In Washington, that doesn't happen. The Dodd-Frank bill, it's 2,400 pages. There's some good things, there's some bad things, but quite frankly, we've got to look at the bill and agree that it can't be 100% right.
What don't both parties go into a compromise or go into a discussion knowing that you're not going to get 100% of what you want?
Well, what happened, if you remember, back in 2008 when that bill passed, it was, we had a Democrat House, a Democrat Senate, and a Democrat president, and a lot of things got accomplished without discussion with the Republicans. The one thing I will say that Speaker Boehner allows is he allows open conversation and open debate on every bill that comes through. Whether you like him or not, he does believe the House needs to work. He believes that we need to make sure that people have the right to amend things and change things, and it does get out on the House floor.
Okay, Congressman Jim Renacci, he's in our studio. Let's talk about the presidential campaign. And what do you think of Paul Ryan as Governor Romney's selection as a vice presidential candidate?
Well, it's an interesting selection. There were a lot of good candidates. All of the candidates, the last 3.
I was pulling for Rob Portman. I don't know.
Rob Portman's from Ohio. I was pulling for him, too.
Yeah.
But all 3 were good. All 3 could step in and be president someday. I think that's very important. And I think one thing that Paul Ryan brings to the table is he understands the spending habits in Washington. He understands the budget. He's been an architect of the House budget for the last 2 years. And I think he does understand. Agree or disagree, he's at least was able to put a plan out through committee, and it got passed. We wish the Senate would do something, too.
Well, I agree with you. I like the fact that he did get something. He did establish a budget, and it did get passed. I don't like the budget or a lot of provisions in the budget, but at least he did something as opposed to some of the folks who haven't even tried to do that. In terms of that budget, though, did you vote for his budget?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Now, would you consider him a conservative?
Yes, I would believe he's conservative.
Then, you know, in looking at his budget, and it's a complicated document, I don't profess to know everything about it, but he doesn't propose to balance the budget for another 30 years. I thought that one of the things that I wanted to see in whose ever budget, Democrat or Republican budget, that was submitted out there was a plan to balance the budget rather a lot sooner than 30 years. Are you disappointed in that aspect of it?
Well, one thing I've learned, Ron, since I've been down there is it's going to take time to balance a budget. We didn't get here overnight. And the problem with balancing the budget is we have to look at all expenditures. We have to make sure if you tried to balance the budget today and cut, you know, $1.5 trillion out of the budget, you would send a shock into the United States economy. And I think what we need to do is establish a trajectory to get it balanced. Now, keep in mind, part of the budget, let's face it, includes the entitlement side. And the entitlements have to be looked at. And what we have said in this budget is, especially when it comes to Medicare and Medicaid, no one 55 and older, nothing changes. Nothing changes. So that's a 10-year window where nothing changes, where entitlements are a problem. After, you know, for people under 55, there has to be some change, and that's part of the budget. That's why the greatest trajectory change occurs after 10 years.
Well, since you brought up Medicare, that's a good point for us to go into, and it does not change. The proposed budget does not change until, except for folks 55 and younger, at which point a premium support system or a voucher system, which some people call, goes into play. That particular part of that budget is taking a lot of heat because folks are saying you're doing away with Medicare. How do you respond to that?
Well, first thing, one thing I learned in Congress, and I hope your listeners learn, is that if we do nothing, if we do absolutely nothing, in 9 years Medicare is insolvent. So we have to do something. We have to make it. We have to be able to make sure that Medicare is around for our children, our grandchildren. We have to make sure it's solvent for the future. So we have to make some kind of change. And remember that Medicare was a system set up 42 years ago based on life expectancy of age 65.
But is the change that premium support system is that the right change?
Well, it's a bipartisan plan. Remember, it was submitted, you know, Senator-wide.
Yeah, no, bipartisan. One Democrat out of what?
Well, when you still get, let's face it, when you get that, you get some input. I'd like to see more input. But you know what I always say, Ron? If the opponents have a better plan, let's see it.
I agree with that. I agree, but I wouldn't call it a bipartisan plan when one Democrat voted for it. But again, under the premium support system, and we got to take a break. Stefan's giving us that eye. We got to take a break. But on the other side of the break, I want to come back to that conversation because I've gotten some emails from the Democrat side that I'd like to get some response from you on.
Sure.
Okay. Congressman Jim Renacci in our studio. We have Congressman Jim Renacci in our studio. And Jim, before we went to the break, we were talking about Medicare and in the context of Vice Presidential candidate Paul Ryan's budget. The parameters now are that his suggestions are that for seniors 55 and younger, that will change. Current seniors, it won't change. Nothing will change. But the change that he's looking for folks who are 55 and younger is that the system will revert to what he calls a premium support system. Some folks call it a voucher system. I don't really care what you call it. But in that, these seniors, and correct me if I'm wrong because I don't know, these seniors who will be seniors then will receive a certain amount of money from the federal government to buy their insurance. And they can either buy a newer version of Medicare, or they can go out on the private market and buy insurance on that level. But the criticism that I hear is that because they're seniors and so many of them may have some more prominent health issues than younger folks, that the health insurance companies are not going to be looking to insure them. They can't make money off of them. So the money that they will be given, the stipend, the voucher that they will be given, is not going to be enough to give them the adequate care under Medicare. So consequently, they're going to be out about $6,400. That's what has been computed per senior. Now, is this saying that those 55 and younger now, when they get to be Medicare eligible, they're going to have to also cough up an additional $6,400 a year for coverage. And if that's the case, how do you tell seniors that these 55-year-olds that that's a good thing for them?
Well, first off, Ron, keep in mind that that's a plan, but there is law right now that actually has changed Medicare forever based on the law, and that's the President's Health Care Plan. It does have two factors that change Medicare forever. One of them is this cut of $714 billion, and
that's not a cut, Jim. Now we know that's not a cut.
Now wait a minute, it's a cut. If the government said that this radio station was going to have to cut their increase revenues over the next 10 years, and it was going to affect Ron Ponder, would your show be different? I don't know. That's the question you have to look at. You really always have to look. There's doctors that are saying we can't take any more cuts. When you cut those services out,
well, the services that $716 billion. I know the Romney commercials and everybody's saying on the right that it's a cut. Everybody on the left is saying that it's not a cut. In fact, there was a report that came out 2 days ago that said without that $716 billion savings, is what they called it, that the Medicare fund would be depleted in about 20 years. But here's their justification for it, and I'm sure you've heard it, is that $716 billion is still there. It's just not paid to the insurers, and it's not paid to the hospitals. It's paid to the beneficiaries. So in their mind, it's not a cut.
Well, when did you ever hear, other than Washington, that a savings is not a cut? I mean, let's face it. That's the problem with Washington. It's the political rhetoric. I'm a CPA. If you gave me a 10-year budget and you said you were cutting my revenue streams over the next 10 years, that's a cut. That's not a savings. The problem is somebody has to pay for services, and the health insurance companies have to pay. So it is a cut. I mean, for me, it's a pretty simple thing. It is a cut, and there'll be doctors that'll get less money. There'll be providers that'll get less money. There'll be insurance companies that get.
But it won't be a cut to the beneficiaries, to the folks who are paying, who are covered under the coverage.
If the provider of care is not there or not willing to take care of them, there is a cut in their services. And let me also talk about the 15-member IPAB board, because people...
Is that the death panel Sarah Palin used to talk about?
Look, I don't call it the death panel, but it is a situation where 15 unelected officials will make decisions in health care. If the seniors...
Who do you propose? Who should make that decision?
I think the individual and the doctor. Nobody should come between the individual and the doctor in making a healthcare decision.
Isn't there a group now for folks to determine Medicare eligible people? Isn't there a non-elected group that does that now? Hospitals do it. And insurance companies do it.
Yeah, but that's based on age and requirements. That's not based on health. And that's the problem. Whenever you put an unelected officials together, you have a problem. And I just think America and seniors need to know that. This is what we already have. This is what we already have. Now, what we're talking about doing is going forward with a plan that protects people 55 and older. And for those 54 and under, there is basically some means testing. See, nobody ever wants to talk about that.
And that's unfortunate, because I think it's a good thing.
Right.
I don't have a problem with means testing. What I have a problem with is when I get to be Medicare eligible in terms of age, am I going to have to pay an additional $6,400?
No, you would be part of that. See, that's an average.
If I were under 55 right. At this point, which 39 is under 55.
But see, that's an average. So you're going to have people that are going to need more money. Those are the safety net, and Jim Renacci does not. I mean, I always believe in a safety net. I spent my whole career taking care of the elderly. I want to make sure they're taken care of. So I'm always going to work toward making sure the safety net is taken care of. But let's face it, there are some millionaires and billionaires, as the other side wants to call them, that aren't going to need as much money. And their premium, they may have to pay a little bit more. That's what means testing is all about. We don't need to raise taxes on people. We just need to change systems.
Well, okay. Jim Renacci's congressman for the 16th Congressional District. His opponent is Betty Sutton. She'll be here next week. We're grateful for the congressman to step in right now. No, I don't want to take any phone calls right now, Stefan. Congressman, one of the other things that we talked about briefly was a budget, and you mentioned taxes. In Paul Ryan's budget, there is no, I didn't see any increase in taxes. From what I hear from the other side, and this is what my Democratic not necessarily friends, but acquaintances are saying, is that you can't really balance a budget. Paul Ryan's budget's due to be balanced in 20, 25 years. But any budget that should be negotiated has to have not just cuts in it, but also revenue enhancement or an increase in taxes on it. How do you feel about that?
Well, the answer really is, look, we have loopholes we need to get rid of. We have an effective tax rate of 24-25%. Why don't we take a look at our tax code? Why don't we simplify it? Why don't we eliminate some of these loopholes that people are talking about? At the same time, when you eliminate loopholes, you are going to have some revenue increases. Let's face it, you don't have to hit people on the head with tax increases.
Can you eliminate enough loopholes to adequately increase the revenue stream?
Well, first off, if we get think about it, if we can get the economy moving again, if we can get jobs, if we can get people paying into the system, having a job, paying taxes, we don't need to raise taxes. I was able to balance a budget in the city of Wadsworth without raising taxes.
Yeah, but, you know, and I compliment you on that, but to me, and again, I don't know. I'm hearing your side. I'm hearing the other side. I'm trying to figure out which side is telling the truth so I know who to vote for. The other side is saying that Republicans only want to cut benefits. There's nothing. They'll come to the table, and before they come to the table, they'll say, okay, we came to compromise and came to come to an agreement, but I'm not going to raise taxes.
Well, let's face it, that's political rhetoric again. It's the thing that drives me crazy.
But they haven't done it yet.
Well,
this could be rhetoric, but it's also action.
We don't have a revenue problem in Washington. We have a spending problem in Washington. If I had the time to sit down with you and looked at I mean, again, I'm a CPA. I understand numbers. I would love to be able to present that. I presented it at all of my town halls. Something my opponent needs to do. Get out and explain her position. My position is, look, I'll show you where the numbers are going. The revenues are moving reasonably up. The expenses are skyrocketing. You got to get the lines closer together.
I agree with that. I don't have a problem with that. We only have 3 minutes, so we got a lot of territory to try to cover, Jim. One is Aiken, Todd Aiken. What a mess there. How do you feel about all of that?
Well, look, his comments were offensive and appalling. He needs to step down. I'm a believer that he should step down, but I think now that I'm more concerned about the 16th district and the people here. I think the people of Missouri need to make the decision for that. But if it was me, that's my opinion.
Okay. 16th congressional district. You and Congresswoman Betty Sutton are jockeying on debates right now. There's one agreed to right now. That's at the City Club in Cleveland. Is that have you guys agreed to that?
Here's what happened, Ron. We were, from my knowledge, we were asked to go to the city of Cleveland. And when I first got that letter, I thought, well, that's outside the district. But it is a major media area of the district. So I said, okay. And
did she say yeah too?
Congressman Sutton wanted to do that one. So I agreed to it. But at the same time, we were asked by the Worcester Chamber, who has done this 16th district debate for the last 2 cycles. And we said okay to that. Now, what I understand, I talked to actually the chamber called me yesterday and said, nobody has called them and told them she's not coming. But I understand that the newspaper, the Plain Dealer, called them yesterday and said she wasn't coming. And all I've ever asked is, her campaign should be talking to my campaign. And we should be agreeing.
I agree with that.
We have not heard once back from her campaign. Her campaign manager has not called my...
Well, I do know that the Canton Repository and this radio station have also extended an invitation for you guys to debate in Canton. Canton used to be, before the changes in the 16th congressional district, we used to be top dog here. Now you guys are talking Cleveland, you're talking Worcester. Are you going to debate in Canton?
Well, as I said, if we're asked, we would certainly consider that. It's in the district, and we think the people of the 16th district need to hear from their people who want to represent them.
I love that. I like that, and I appreciate you for saying that, too. And I know we got to go, but we may disagree on a lot of things, but we agree on that. And we're going to make sure that we, as a radio station, try to make that happen, because that's what we want to see. Good luck to you, okay?
Thank you, Ron. I think we agree on a lot more than you believe.
You're right. You're right. We agree on a lot of things. Yeah. We do. Disagree on some things.
Oh, we do. But that's what makes the world go round.
But we do it civilly.
Exactly.
And that's the key. Appreciate you stopping in.
Thank you so much.
Okay.